A crowd had gathered in front of the church in San Francisco. It felt as if the entire city had paused for a moment. Relatives, well-known figures from the business world, and colleagues from the clinic where I had worked for years, all had come to say a final farewell to my father. People dressed in black stood silently, heads bowed. No one spoke loudly, no one rushed. Every face carried the same weight, a deep, wordless sorrow born of loss. The air felt heavy, as though the stone walls of the church had absorbed the grief themselves. Steps were careful, even breaths measured. In those moments, the stillness was broken only by the priest's calm, trembling voice. His words echoed through the church before fading back into silence. Each syllable made my father's absence feel more real, more permanent. As soon as the priest finished his prayer, my sister-in-law Catherine took the microphone, her tone proud and commanding. "Kevin is now officially the new CEO of our $500 million empire." She scanned the room, expecting applause and admiring gazes. But in that instant, everything changed. From the expensive sound system, a sudden voice rang out, a loud, clear, dry laugh, coming directly from my father's coffin. Everyone froze. This wasn't a ghost, not even a spirit. It was a cold, carefully orchestrated recording. Yet the fear on my brother's face, that was completely real, and it cut deep. I watched quietly, knowing this was only the beginning. Comment below where you're listening from, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. Let's see how many of us are in this community and who heard my father's final message. For my brother Kevin and his wife Catherine, the funeral was just another event. Their attention was focused entirely on my father's fortune. I sat in the front row watching them. Kevin shook hands with board members, accepting condolences for a role he had not yet even begun. Catherine pointed out the cathedral's stained glass windows, whispering how beautiful they would look in the executive office. Suddenly, Kevin leaned forward, adjusted his tie, and whispered, "Don't worry, Linda, we'll find a spot for you in the basement. You can finally take a break from running around the clinic all day." Then, with a smirk, he added, "At least here, you can hand out tea to the office staff." Kevin had always been spoiled, being the firstborn. I said nothing, asked for nothing. I turned to my father's old friend, Paula, who had been his right hand for many years, sitting at the other end of our row. I simply nodded. Paul understood immediately. Holding a remote in his hand, he stood and quietly moved to the back of the church. He locked the heavy oak doors, then aimed the remote at the giant projector screen placed behind the altar in my father's memory. He pressed play. The screen flickered and lit up. But this was not a tribute video. It was my father, Robert. He sat behind his desk, looking straight at the camera. There was no ease in his expression. It was as if he were about to fire someone. And then it began. The laugh. It echoed through the church, loud and jarring. Kevin and Catherine froze where they stood. The coronation that had been staged prematurely was over. Now the real audit was beginning. Members of the community watched the massive screen, taking in my father's stern, uncompromising face. While Kevin was busy building networks in Europe and creating a brand at premium car events, I spent my afternoons negotiating with labor unions on the outskirts of Cleveland after my part-time shifts at the clinic. Every step was difficult, but I did everything I could to keep the supply chain running. The real life, the real blood of this company was here, and I was the invisible force protecting it. For 10 years, I worked mornings at the clinic and afternoons here. My father had allowed me to come in the afternoon so he wouldn't discourage my interest in medicine. And here, I helped him with the work. When a problem arose, I was the unseen hand that solved it. During my years in the company, I dedicated my life entirely to it, often setting aside personal matters. This was my father's business, and I had to be available at every moment. I had always taken my responsibilities seriously. I meticulously checked fuel costs and optimized delivery routes. In one fiscal year alone, I had prevented $12 million in operational losses. I thought to myself that doing this was my dignity, a repayment of a debt for the family name, my responsibility, my obligation. In reality, I had built invisible chains for myself, loops of duty and accountability. I thought staying in the shadows demonstrated my loyalty. I thought my father saw it, that he understood I was the company's unseen power. But at that moment, when Catherine tightened her pearl necklace, I realized that my silence had never been a strategy. It was simply permission I had given them. Because I had asked for nothing, I had allowed them to erase me. I had made it possible for them to see me as a natural resource, exploitable, unvalued. I wasn't their employee, I was their support. No one thanks the foundation of a house. Everyone simply assumes it exists. And that very misconception became their greatest mistake. They assumed that because I was silent, I was weak. They didn't understand that I was silent because I was counting, recording every detail. I wasn't just working. I was quietly accumulating capital in a ledger they could never see. To understand why I felt not an ounce of guilt as I watched my brother sweat through the funeral, you have to go back 3 days. Just 4 hours after our father's death, the medical examiner had left the house. But Kevin and Catherine didn't go to the mourning home, nor did they visit the family. They went straight to the corporate headquarters. I was already there, inside my father's office working with Paul to stabilize the value of shares, convincing global partners that the company wouldn't collapse. We were grieving, but we were working, because the work demanded it. And then Kevin arrived. He wasn't dressed in black, and he didn't look like someone in mourning. He looked like he was headed to a real business meeting. He approached the massive oak desk my father had crafted with his own hands, ran his finger along its edge, and said, "I need to change this. I want a glass desk." Meanwhile, Catherine picked up her phone and called the interior designer. "We need to tear up this floor as well," she said. "It needs more modern rooms and a proper entrance." Paul stood up, his face pale with grief, yet he tried to remain composed. "We have a liquidity crisis," he said. "The drivers are worried about their pensions." Kevin laughed. "Relax, Paul. You won't be here much longer anyway. We need fresh blood. You're old news. Accept it." Then he turned toward me. I was holding urgent dispatch documents, and Kevin snatched them from my hands and threw them to the floor. "As for you, Linda," he said with a mocking tone, "we need someone with charisma for this company. You can stay, but you'll manage the paperwork and the coffee orders. The boring tasks are your responsibility. After all, you're just a decorative secretary, aren't you?" He continued, instructing me to keep the lights on while he spent profits, while for the next hour they talked about selling the truck fleet and buying a villa in Miami. They pretended it was all part of a future remote business plan. They plotted to turn a 50-year legacy into a permanent vacation. On paper, they were kings. They thought a title meant power. But real power comes from people's respect for you, and in just 1 hour, they lost it. I didn't argue. I gathered the scattered documents. I looked at Paul, whose eyes were burning with fire, and in that moment, the plan was born. They wanted the crown. They could have taken it, but they wouldn't be able to bear its weight. It would drag them down. The video didn't turn into a memory montage or a tender farewell. No fishing trips were shown, no birthdays celebrated, not a single feeling was softened. My father leaned back in his leather chair, arms folded across his chest. The camera slowly zoomed in on his eyes. His gaze was hard, cold. The gaze of a man who, for 40 years, had stood firm against both lazy employees and a crumbling supply chain. He cleared his throat. His voice rang through the cathedral as if a hammer had struck the pulpit. "Kevin," he said, "you've waited 10 years for this day, for me to leave, so you could spend money without permission. You mistook my generosity for a father's love. You thought every check I signed meant yes." The image on the screen changed. The video moved to the corner, replaced by a massive, high-quality Excel spreadsheet. Rows were marked in red. This was a ledger. a ledger of sins. "Let's review the portfolio," my father's voice said, cold and formal. "Item 1, nightclub in Miami. You called it cultural investment. Cost $2,400,000. Result, bankrupt in 6 months. Item 2, classic car restoration business. Cost $1,800,000. Result, sold for scrap. Item 3, personal branding consultants, $400,000 per year." A complete silence filled the cathedral. Even the hum of the air conditioner was audible. Catherine no longer looked at the stained glass windows. She stared at the screen, following the flow of numbers, her mouth slightly open. This was an open audit of their entire lifestyle. "Everyone said I spoiled you," my father's voice continued. "They said I ruined you by giving you everything you wanted. But they were wrong. I wasn't spoiling you, my son. I was testing you. It was a test of character. I gave you unlimited resources to see if you could build something, or if you would destroy everything. Could a spoiled child turn lead into gold? Or would you just paint everything yellow and call it a day? That's what I wanted to see." This was the exposure of a spoiled child. My father hadn't ignored Kevin's incompetence. He documented it. He allowed Kevin to ruin his own future because it was the only way to prove he was unfit for leadership. My father had handed him the rope. Kevin had tied the knot himself. "You failed the test, Kevin," my father said. The spreadsheet vanished, and his face reappeared on the screen. "You burned it all. But there's one thing you forgot. I'm a businessman. I don't give capital without documentation. Remember the contracts Paul had you sign? Every time money was transferred, you didn't read them. You were busy opening champagne. But if you had read them, you'd know something important." His face appeared on the screen again, cold, with a terrifying smile. "These weren't gifts, Kevin. They were loans. Loans against your inheritance. And by my calculation, you've already spent every cent." The spreadsheet disappeared. A clean white document appeared in its place. At the bottom, in bold blue ink, was a massive signature: Kevin Harper. Kevin leaned forward on the bench, his jaw dropped, hands trembling. "5 years ago," my father's voice continued from the video, "there was an incident in Los Angeles that required urgent and silent collateral. You signed the debt and share transfer agreement, but you didn't read it. The font was small, and you were drunk. Let me read the key clause." The 4th paragraph on the screen was highlighted. "If the borrower's debt to the company exceeds $5 million, he hereby forfeits all future voting rights and claims to inheritance. Furthermore, these shares will immediately transfer to whoever repays the debt." Absolute silence reigned in the cathedral. You could have heard a pin drop. My father paused in the video, letting the weight of the legal words settle on everyone present. "Last month," he said, "your debt reached $5,200,000. The company could have sued you. They could have taken your house, your cars, everything. But someone stepped in. She wrote a check to close the accounts. She put her own bonus, her savings, and her hard-earned shares on the line to keep the company afloat." The screen changed. A bank transfer receipt appeared. Amount $5,200,000. Sender, Linda Harper. "You didn't inherit this company, my son," my father said, his voice a whisper yet striking like a shout. "You sold it piece by piece, bit by bit, and your sister bought it at market price. Now the shares, the votes, even the seat you sat in belong to her." When Catherine looked at Kevin, there was neither love nor concern on her face. She screamed, a woman who realized her father had put the money in the wrong hands, but her voice was drowned out by my father's words. "Linda," my father said, looking at the camera with a warmth I hadn't seen in years. "The keys are in the safe. You will get them from there." The video turned black. The hum of the projector stopped. Silence filled the room. Slowly the lights came on, illuminating the remnants of my brother's ego. I looked at Catherine. She slowly turned toward Kevin. The expression in her eyes had changed. In that moment, she realized she hadn't married a CEO. She had married a man with $5 million in debt and zero assets. I didn't console her. "You lied to me," she whispered, cutting through the silence. "You said it was all over. You said the money was yours." Kevin then approached me, his face pale. He was panicking. He tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. In a trembling voice, he said, "Linda, this must be a joke, right? Dad was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. You can't really do this. We're family." "They don't fire family." I looked at him carefully and realized a deep truth. For years, I had feared him and Catherine. They had been so arrogant. Now they looked small and weak. I understood that their power had never been real. The authority they constantly flaunted no longer existed. I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and quietly extended it toward him. "This isn't a joke, Kevin," I said calmly. "This is an immediate notice of termination. Paul has already deactivated your cards and revoked your access to the company accounts. And inside," I continued, "is a payment schedule for the remaining $200,000 you still owe on the property. I expect the first payment on the 1st of the month. No delays." Kevin wanted to speak, but no sound came out. He froze in place, a king without a kingdom. The board members behind us glanced at their watches. It was time to return to work. Outside, Paul waited by the car, a faint smile on his face. The chaos was over. We entered the office. A heavy burden had been lifted, or rather, a new one had been assumed, the burden of entrepreneurship. At that moment, my phone vibrated. A notification appeared. Catherine had filed for divorce. I swiped it away and deleted it. Then Kevin called. I blocked the number. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt over any of this. On the contrary, I no longer worried about what Kevin might destroy next. For the first time, I was certain this empire was in safe hands. If this story resonated with you, if you believe that leadership is earned through character and skill, not inheritance, hit the like button and share this story. If it were you, would you give someone like Kevin a second chance after such mistakes, or would you deliver justice with your own hands? Share your thoughts in the comments and become part of our community.